Ethan Carter was used to the clatter of knives and the sizzle of pans. As the owner of Ambrosia, one of New York City's most acclaimed restaurants, he had built his career on precision, passion, and an uncompromising vision for perfection. Yet, as he stood before the gleaming glass facade of his empire on a chilly October night, unease gnawed at his confidence. For weeks, whispers had reached him, rumors of declining standards, discontent among staff, and regular patrons turning away with dissatisfaction. Ethan, a man of meticulous detail, couldn't fathom how his finely tuned machine could falter. Determined to uncover the truth, he devised a plan. He would go undercover, working alongside his employees as a lowly kitchen hand. Stripped of his authority, he would witness the cracks in the foundation of his dream firsthand. By the time Ethan returned home, his decision was made. The next morning, he informed his assistant manager, Adrian, of a fabricated need to step away due to personal reasons. Adrian, a polished professional but overly trusting, didn't question Ethan's abrupt leave. The following week, Ethan entered Ambrosia through the back entrance, wearing a wrinkled uniform and carrying the name tag Dan. The bustling energy of the kitchen was as intoxicating as he remembered, but something felt off. The once synchronized team moved with a tension that seemed to poison the air. Shouting matches erupted between the sous chefs and line cooks over small mistakes. Plates came back to the kitchen half-eaten, and the normally pristine counters were smudged with remnants of chaos. "New guy?" barked Lisa, the head chef, eyeing Ethan skeptically. She was a formidable woman with a sharp wit and sharper knives. Ethan nodded, feigning nervousness. "Yeah, Dan? Just here to help wherever I can," Lisa scoffed. "Hope you can keep up. We're not here to babysit." Ethan's first task was to clean the fryers, a job meant for the rookies. As he scrubbed, he observed. It didn't take long to spot the fractures in his kitchen's dynamic. Carlos, the pastry chef, had a habit of accidentally dropping desserts meant for certain servers, smirking as they scrambled to redo their orders. Ava, the sous chef, whispered harsh criticisms about Lisa when she thought no one was listening. The tension boiled over when a waiter returned with yet another complaint about an undercooked steak. Ethan's heart sank further that night when he overheard a heated exchange between Lisa and Sarah, the general manager. "If you keep ignoring the supplier's invoices, we'll lose our best ones," Lisa hissed. Sarah, unfazed, leaned against the counter, sipping from a mug that smelled suspiciously like whiskey. "Relax. Ethan's not here. He doesn't know a damn thing." At closing time, Ethan sat in the break room, exhausted and disillusioned. His world had always been built on trust and excellence, but behind the polished walls of Ambrosia, he had found cracks deeper than he feared. As he prepared to leave, a muffled argument erupted from the manager's office. The voices of Sarah and an unknown man echoed through the empty restaurant. Ethan lingered by the door, straining to hear. "Do you think he suspects?" the man's voice asked. "Not yet," Sarah replied. "But if he finds out what we've done, we're finished." Ethan barely slept that night. The conversation he overheard replayed in his mind like a broken record. What had Sarah meant by "what we've done"? And who was the man she spoke with? Ethan knew he needed answers, but patience would be his only ally. If he revealed his identity too soon, the web of deceit might vanish before he could unravel it. The next day, Dan returned to work, slipping into the chaos of the kitchen unnoticed. He greeted his colleagues with practiced meekness, blending into the background. The morning passed in a blur of orders and shouts, but Ethan's focus was elsewhere. His eyes lingered on Sarah, who spent more time on her phone than managing the staff. When she finally left her office for a coffee run, Ethan seized the opportunity. Her office was cluttered, but orderly enough to betray a certain rhythm to her routine. Ethan scanned the desk for anything out of the ordinary. Among the invoices and menus, he found a small notebook shoved under a stack of papers. Its leather cover was worn, as if it had been flipped through countless times. Inside were scribbled notes, dates, amounts of money, and names he didn't recognize. March 12th, $5,000. PO confirmed. April 22nd, $8,200, supplier number 4 hold. June 1st, $12,000, delivery managed. Ethan's stomach churned. These weren't ordinary transactions. They hinted at something far more clandestine. As he flipped further, a folded piece of paper fell out. It was a receipt, one that bore the name of a catering company he knew Ambrosia hadn't used in years. A sickening suspicion began to take root. Before he could analyze further, the door creaked open. Ethan barely managed to shove the notebook back and turn toward the desk, pretending to rearrange menus. Sarah stood in the doorway, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing in here?" she asked sharply. Ethan plastered on his most apologetic expression. "Sorry, ma'am. Lisa sent me to grab more order slips. I got lost." Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she let it go with a sigh. "Get out, and tell Lisa to come see me when you're done." The confrontation left Ethan rattled but more determined than ever. He needed to tread carefully, and he needed an ally. That evening, as the team cleaned up, he approached Ava, the sous chef. Ava had a sharp tongue but was known for her honesty, a rare quality in the tumultuous kitchen. "Hey," Ethan began, keeping his tone casual. "You've been here a while, right?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "What's it to you?" "Just curious. This place, it's different than I expected. Doesn't feel like the kind of place to get a Michelin star, you know?" Her expression darkened. "Yeah, well, it used to be, before Sarah started running the show." Ethan pressed, careful not to overstep. "Why? What happened?" Ava hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Look, I don't know everything, but Sarah's not as squeaky clean as she pretends to be. She's been cutting corners, cheap suppliers, bogus invoices. Hell, I've even heard whispers about her pocketing money from fake events. But good luck proving it. She's got half the staff wrapped around her finger." Ethan's suspicions were confirmed, but the scale of Sarah's schemes was still unclear. That night, he combed through his memories of Ambrosia's accounts. Had there been discrepancies he'd missed? He remembered an unusually large expense report a few months ago. One Sarah had assured him was due to a special wine import. Now he wasn't so sure. The next day brought more revelations. While scrubbing pots in the dish pit, Ethan overheard Carlos, the pastry chef, muttering to himself, "Another wasted batch. If she thinks I'm covering for her one more time, she's got another thing coming." Ethan waited until the kitchen was quieter before approaching. "Hey, Carlos, you all right?" Carlos glared at him. "What do you care? Just noticed you seemed frustrated. Figured maybe I could help." Carlos sighed, his shoulders slumping. "It's Sarah. She's been making us fix her mistakes. Last week she accidentally ordered the wrong ingredients and blamed it on me. Now I'm stuck trying to make her crap taste edible." Ethan filed the information away. Sarah's incompetence was bad enough, but her willingness to scapegoat her staff revealed her true character. As the week dragged on, Ethan pieced together more of the puzzle. Sarah wasn't just mismanaging the restaurant. She was exploiting it for personal gain. But the full extent of her schemes remained elusive. Ethan decided it was time to escalate. He needed proof, something irrefutable that would expose Sarah for who she truly was. His opportunity came when he overheard Sarah on the phone. "Yeah, I'll meet you at the warehouse tonight. Just make sure it's all there. I don't want any screw-ups." Ethan's pulse quickened. Whatever she was planning, it was happening that evening. He slipped out of the restaurant after his shift, tailing Sarah as she drove through the city. Her destination was a nondescript building in an industrial district. Ethan parked at a distance, watching as she entered the warehouse. The faint glow of lights spilled from the windows, and Ethan could make out shadows moving inside. Heart pounding, he crept closer, peering through a crack in the door. What he saw made his blood run cold. Stacks of boxes labeled with Ambrosia's logo lined the walls, but the contents weren't food. Instead, they were filled with expensive wines, rare spices, and gourmet products, none of which had ever made it to the restaurant. Sarah was smuggling high-end goods and selling them under the table. Ethan backed away, his mind racing. This was bigger than he had imagined. Sarah's theft wasn't just hurting Ambrosia's reputation, it was a full-blown criminal enterprise. He knew what he had to do. The question was, could he trust anyone to help him bring her down? Ethan returned home, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. The warehouse wasn't just evidence of Sarah's corruption. It was proof that she had been systematically draining Ambrosia to fund her operation. But exposing her wouldn't be easy. She was calculating, and if she caught even a hint of his plans, she would cover her tracks. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Ambrosia early. He headed straight for the storage room, under the guise of organizing supplies. As he sifted through the cluttered shelves, he found several boxes with faintly matching descriptions to the ones he had seen in the warehouse. A closer look revealed tampered inventory logs. Items were listed as delivered, but had clearly never been used. Sarah was siphoning off Ambrosia's resources under the pretense of business operations. Ethan took photos of the logs with his phone. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a start. As the lunch rush began, Ethan noticed Sarah lingering near the entrance. A man in a crisp suit walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. They exchanged tense words, their voices low. Ethan edged closer, pretending to polish silverware near the bar. "I told you, it's under control," Sarah said. Her tone clipped. The man scowled. "It better be. If this falls apart, you know who's taking the heat." Before Sarah could respond, a loud crash from the kitchen broke their conversation. Ethan rushed back to find Lisa shouting at Carlos, who had dropped an entire tray of eclairs. Carlos snapped back, his voice laced with frustration. "You want perfection? Then maybe stop buying cheap ingredients." Lisa froze, her face a mix of fury and embarrassment. Ethan could see the kitchen staff watching intently, waiting to see if Lisa would retaliate. Instead, she stormed off, muttering under her breath. Ethan followed her to the break room, where she was pacing furiously. "Lisa?" he said cautiously. "Are you okay?" She shot him a sharp look but didn't send him away. "No, I'm not okay. This place is falling apart, and it's not my fault. I'm doing my best, but Sarah keeps cutting corners, and I'm the one left to deal with the mess." Ethan hesitated, then said, "What if someone could prove it's Sarah's fault? Would you back them up?" Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Why? You think you can take her down?" Ethan held her gaze. "Maybe, but I need someone on my side, someone who knows this place as well as I do." Lisa's expression softened, her anger giving way to suspicion. "You're not just some rookie, are you?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I'm here because I care about this place, more than anyone knows." Lisa crossed her arms, considering. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but if you're serious about this, you better have more than just suspicions." That evening, Ethan met Lisa after the restaurant closed. She led him to the office, where she pulled out a small black folder from her desk. "These are copies of the inventory reports from the last 6 months. I keep backups because Sarah's been messing with the numbers. I didn't know what she was up to, but I had a feeling it wasn't good." Ethan flipped through the pages, the pattern of theft becoming painfully clear. "This is perfect," he said. "Thank you." Lisa smirked. "Don't thank me yet. If this blows up, I'm taking you down with me." The next step was riskier, confronting Ava. She was outspoken, but also fiercely protective of her position. If Sarah had dirt on her, she might not be willing to cooperate. Ethan found her sitting in the prep area after her shift, scrolling through her phone. "Ava," he said, pulling up a chair, "can we talk?" She raised an eyebrow. "What's this about?" "Sarah," Ethan said simply. Ava stiffened, her expression guarded. "What about her?" "I know what she's doing," Ethan said. "The fake invoices, the stolen goods, it's all coming out. But if you know anything, you need to tell me. This place is sinking, and if she goes down, she'll drag the rest of us with her." Ava stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "I don't know everything, but I've seen enough. She's been skimming off the top for years. I even saw her take cash from the register once. But if you think you can stop her, good luck. She's got Adrian wrapped around her finger." Ethan frowned. Adrian, the assistant manager, had always seemed honest. Could he really be involved? Or was Sarah using him without his knowledge? Ethan's opportunity to test Adrian's loyalty came sooner than expected. The next day, Adrian caught Ethan loitering near the office. "Dan, what are you doing back here?" Thinking quickly, Ethan said, "I found some receipts in the storage room. They don't match up with the inventory logs." Adrian looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated, studying Adrian's reaction. "I think someone's been messing with the books. If Sarah finds out, she's going to blame someone else. Probably you." Adrian's face darkened. "Sarah wouldn't do that." "Are you sure?" Ethan asked pointedly. "Because I'm not." Adrian seemed to falter, his confidence shaken. "I'll look into it," he said, finally brushing past Ethan. That night, Ethan returned to the warehouse. He couldn't rely on anyone else to take the next step. This time, he brought his phone to document everything. As he slipped inside, the sound of voices reached him. He ducked behind a stack of crates, his heart pounding. "It's all here," Sarah's voice said. "We'll move the next shipment tomorrow." "What about the restaurant?" another voice asked. "Is it safe?" Sarah scoffed. "Please, they don't suspect a thing." Ethan clenched his fists, anger boiling within him. She was wrong. He suspected plenty, and soon, so would everyone else. Ethan crouched behind the crates, the cold air of the warehouse biting at his skin. His phone trembled in his hands as he recorded Sarah and the man discussing the operation. Their voices were clear enough to capture every incriminating word. "Make sure the goods are gone by morning," Sarah instructed, her tone sharp and authoritative. "If anything goes wrong, it's on you." "Relax," the man replied, his voice thick with disdain. "I've been running these routes longer than you've been cooking." Sarah's laugh was humorless. "Let's keep it that way. I don't need Ethan or anyone else snooping around." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of his name. They were aware of the risk he posed, but it was clear Sarah had no idea he was already digging into her schemes. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. The evidence he had collected so far was compelling, but he needed one final piece to bring it all together. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Ambrosia as Dan, blending into the chaos of prep work. He had only a few hours before Sarah's shipment would be moved, and he needed to act fast. He decided to confront Adrian, hoping to gauge where the assistant manager's loyalties truly lay. Ethan found Adrian in the office, poring over the day's schedule. "Got a minute?" Ethan asked, closing the door behind him. Adrian looked up, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" Ethan leaned in, his voice low. "I know what Sarah's doing. The fake invoices, the stolen inventory, all of it. She's using this place as her personal piggy bank." Adrian's expression froze, his face betraying a mix of shock and fear. "That's a serious accusation, Dan. You better have proof." Ethan pulled out his phone and played the recording from the warehouse. As Sarah's voice filled the room, Adrian's complexion paled. "Why are you showing me this?" Adrian asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I need to know if you're with her or against her," Ethan replied. "If you've been helping her, now's the time to come clean." Adrian shook his head vehemently. "I didn't know. She told me the invoices were just creative accounting to keep the books balanced. I didn't think she was stealing." "You've been her puppet, Adrian," Ethan interrupted. "But it's not too late to fix this. Help me stop her." Adrian hesitated, the weight of the decision evident on his face. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need me to do?" With Adrian on his side, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. They devised a plan to intercept Sarah's shipment and ensure the authorities had everything they needed to take her down. Adrian would distract Sarah at the restaurant, while Ethan returned to the warehouse to gather more evidence and alert the police. As the evening approached, the tension in Ambrosia was palpable. Sarah prowled the floor, her eyes sharp and calculating. Adrian played his part well, bombarding her with fabricated crises, a delayed reservation, a missing delivery, a broken dishwasher. By the time Sarah stormed back to her office to fix the mess, Ethan was already on his way to the warehouse. The warehouse was eerily quiet when Ethan arrived. The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of dust and metal hung in the air. He slipped inside, heading straight for the rows of crates bearing Ambrosia's logo. This time, he opened one to confirm its contents. Inside were bottles of imported wine, still sealed and labeled with counterfeit distributor names. Ethan snapped photos of the crates and their contents, ensuring every angle was documented. As he worked, he heard the distant sound of footsteps. His heart raced. He ducked behind the stack of crates, clutching his phone tightly. The door creaked open and two figures entered, Sarah and the man from the night before. "I don't like this," the man grumbled. "Too many loose ends." Sarah's voice was cold. "Relax, Adrian's too spineless to do anything, and the staff? They're all too busy whining about broken stoves to notice a thing." Ethan's pulse quickened. He activated the recorder on his phone again, capturing their conversation. "We move this now," Sarah continued. "By the time anyone figures it out, we'll be long gone." Ethan knew he couldn't let them leave with the shipment. Quietly, he slipped out of the warehouse and called the police. He explained the situation as succinctly as he could, emphasizing the urgency. The dispatcher assured him that officers were en route. Minutes felt like hours as Ethan waited outside, hidden in the shadows of the neighboring building. The sound of sirens pierced the silence, growing louder until red and blue lights flooded the street. Officers surrounded the warehouse, their guns drawn. Ethan watched as Sarah and her accomplice were dragged out in handcuffs, their faces etched with shock and fury. He felt a surge of vindication, but it was tempered by the weight of what lay ahead. Ambrosia was far from saved. The fallout of Sarah's betrayal would be massive. The next day, Ethan returned to Ambrosia, not as Dan, but as himself. The staff were abuzz with rumors about Sarah's arrest, and when Ethan walked into the kitchen, all eyes turned to him. "Ethan?" Lisa said, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. "You're back?" Ethan nodded. "And I have a lot to explain." He gathered the team in the dining area, laying everything out, Sarah's schemes, her theft, and his undercover investigation. The reactions ranged from anger to shock to cautious hope. "I know this has been a rough time," Ethan said, "but Ambrosia isn't just my dream, it's ours. We can rebuild together." For the first time in weeks, the staff seemed united. As they returned to work, Ethan felt a spark of the old Ambrosia returning, but he knew the battle wasn't over. Saving his restaurant would require more than just exposing Sarah. It would mean earning back the trust of his team, his customers, and himself. The weeks following Sarah's arrest were tumultuous for Ambrosia. News of the scandal spread quickly, tarnishing the restaurant's once gilded reputation. Regular patrons became scarce, suppliers hesitated to fulfill orders, and Ethan faced a growing mountain of doubt from every corner. He knew there was no choice but to confront the fallout head-on. Every morning, Ethan arrived before dawn, personally inspecting every delivery, ensuring every plate leaving the kitchen was flawless. He worked shoulder to shoulder with his staff, rebuilding the bonds that Sarah's schemes had eroded. One afternoon, Lisa approached him as he scrubbed down the counters. "You're killing yourself, Ethan," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "You don't have to do this alone." Ethan paused, the weight of exhaustion clear in his eyes. "I don't know any other way," he admitted. "You built this place once," Lisa said firmly. "You can do it again. But you have to trust us." Her words struck a chord. For years, Ethan had been the sole architect of Ambrosia's success, but perhaps that was the problem. Trust wasn't just about oversight, it was about collaboration. Ethan called a staff meeting that evening, gathering his team in the dining room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could weather this storm. "We all know what's happened," Ethan began. "Sarah betrayed this place, and I didn't see it coming. That's on me. But this restaurant isn't just about one person, it's about all of us." He paused, scanning the room. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'm asking for your trust. Help me rebuild Ambrosia into the place we all believe it can be." The room was silent for a moment, then Lisa stood. "You've got mine," she said. One by one, the staff nodded their agreement. Even Ava, who had been skeptical of Ethan's return, offered a begrudging thumbs up. Ethan's next challenge was regaining the trust of Ambrosia's patrons. He launched a series of initiatives: community dinners where locals could dine at reduced prices, cooking classes where he shared his culinary expertise, and personal apologies to regular customers who had been let down. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. One evening, during one of the community events, Ethan noticed a familiar face in the crowd: Adrian. He approached hesitantly, unsure how their last encounter had left things. "Adrian," Ethan said, extending a hand. "I owe you a thank you." Adrian shook his hand, a rueful smile on his face. "You owe me a drink, more like it. I didn't think I'd ever set foot in here again." "You did the right thing," Ethan said earnestly. "That took guts." Adrian shrugged. "I just didn't want to end up in handcuffs." The two shared a laugh, the first genuine moment of levity Ethan had experienced in weeks. As Ambrosia regained its footing, Ethan began to see glimpses of its former glory. New reservations trickled in, old regulars returned, and the kitchen buzzed with the energy he had once taken for granted. But one loose end remained. Ethan had spent countless hours trying to piece together how Sarah's operation had gone unnoticed for so long. The warehouse was only part of the equation. There were still unanswered questions about the bogus suppliers and their connection to Ambrosia's accounts. One evening, while sorting through invoices in his office, Ethan found a name that stopped him cold: P.O. Partners. It was listed on numerous transactions over the past year, all signed off by Sarah. Ethan made a call to the listed contact number, posing as a potential client. A gravelly voice answered. P.O. Partners. This is Ethan Carter, he said, his voice steady. Owner of Ambrosia. I think you and I need to talk. The man on the other end paused, then chuckled darkly. I figured you'd come knocking sooner or later. The meeting was arranged at a coffee shop in the city. Ethan arrived early, taking a seat in a secluded corner. A few minutes later, a tall man with a shaved head and a leather jacket approached. Ethan Carter, the man said, sliding into the seat opposite him. I'm Rick. You worked with Sarah, Ethan said, skipping pleasantries. Rick smirked. We had an arrangement. She brought the clients, I handled the logistics. What's this about? Justice, Ethan replied, and making sure no one else gets hurt. Rick leaned back, his smirk fading. You've got guts, I'll give you that, but you're in over your head. Sarah's gone, and this little crusade of yours won't end well. Ethan held his ground. This isn't a negotiation. I've got enough evidence to bury you, Rick. Help me, or you'll be sharing a cell with her. Rick studied Ethan for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but if I go down, I'm not going alone. Rick's testimony, combined with Ethan's evidence, led to a sweeping investigation. The authorities uncovered a web of corruption that extended far beyond Ambrosia. Sarah's arrest became the first in a series of high-profile busts, and Ethan's role in exposing the operation earned him a reputation as both a hero and a survivor. Months later, Ambrosia was thriving again. The scandal, once a dark cloud, became part of its history, a testament to resilience and the power of integrity. The staff had become a family, bonded by their shared struggle and triumph. On a quiet evening, Ethan stood in the kitchen, watching his team. Lisa barked orders with her usual fervor. Carlos laughed as he decorated a cake, and Ava joked with the servers. The restaurant buzzed with life, a symphony of second chances. As the final plate of the night left the kitchen, Lisa approached him, wiping her hands on her apron. We did it, she said, grinning. Ethan nodded, a rare smile spreading across his face. We did. Ambrosia wasn't just a restaurant, it was a story of redemption, proof that even in the face of betrayal, something beautiful could be rebuilt. And as Ethan turned off the lights that night, he knew one thing for certain: the heart of Ambrosia would never be stolen again. The end.